Good morning, March 21st, 2022. A lot of those number twos coming along again. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. I hope you all had a good weekend. I know I did. I went out and bought some bees, and then I attended some protests in downtown Beltline area, Calgary. I mean, what better way to spend some nice warm weather out there? We could look forward to lots of reports of me getting stung head to toe as I take on that bee hobby, but we won't have the hive live for another month and change. So this is the Western Standard's daily live show. We come to you Monday to Friday, 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And being live, we invite those questions, guys. Questions, comments, back and forth. I do have as a guest today, or I had Jean Charest. It will be a recorded interview that does run a little later in the show. I couldn't get him on live. It's hard with these contenders and so on, just like with Mr. Polyev, to get the scheduling with live, but it was good to get a chance to talk to him for about 15 minutes today and answer some questions. It's 7 candidates in that race, so it's going to be a hotly contested one, obviously, and a lot of people going into it. So we're going to try and talk to every leadership candidate in the bunch, and it's going all the way until September. So we'll probably hear from them more than once. And then Melanie Risdon is going to come in. She had a very interesting weekend there and got some great footage taking care of the protests and managed to get herself kicked by a gentleman riding on a horse. Life is always interesting when you head down to these kinds of events and things happen in unexpected ways. So we'll talk to Melanie about that. She's going to come in and we will discuss that. So I'm going to get on, though, on what my usual rant for the day. And this is something else. It was some great online drama and soap opera to watch. It was towards the end of the day on Friday, and some people sent some links and said, "Holy cow, did you see what happened on Ryan Jesperson's show?" I said, "No, we had to watch that. And wow, this was something else." So for those who don't know, Ryan Jesperson has a daily live show. It runs in Edmonton, and it's essentially a left-wing version of what my show here is. Actually, if we're to be fair, we could call my show maybe a classical liberal version of his. His show was created first, after all. Let's be fair there. I usually don't bring up competing outlets, but we have some special circumstances going on here. I mean, Jesperson's been less than flattering of myself and the Western Standard on social media and on his show on occasion. So as far as I'm concerned, the gloves are off. We can snipe at each other. Now, for the moment, Ryan Jesperson's show, which normally runs, it's similar to this. It's live. It runs weekdays. It's down. It's shut down for the moment. They've canceled themselves. I don't know if or when it's coming back. Their site just says it's taken a break, and they'll be back later. So we'll see what happens. Now, this is all over a minor incident last week on his show when he had a debate with one of his producers on the air that festered for 2 days until she had a brutal open meltdown right in the middle of the show. She interrupted his show just before he was about to have guests on, demanded that he condemn some other lefty who had irked her on social media on Twitter, and then she stormed out of the studio. It was an incredibly unprofessional scene. But if you like dark comedy and awkward moments, search it out, Ryan Jesperson, and check out his shows from last Thursday and Friday. I doubt Jesperson even knew what he did wrong, and still he didn't know when he pinned a groveling apology on his Twitter account and recorded a video apology to her. It was a knee-jerk reaction, but that's what the woke do, and as usual, it failed. Lesson number 1, when you're dealing with the woke mob, never apologize. It only empowers them, and it's never enough. We could already see by the responses from people that the mob isn't accepting Jesperson's apology for daring to contradict a woman on his staff. The most complimentary responses I could see to his sniveling apologies was, "It's a start. Now the mob owns him." Now, Jesperson likely didn't realize this because he's a charter member of the woke mob himself. Jesperson danced on the career grave of Don Cherry when Cherry was canceled for talking about those people when he talked about immigrants. And then Jesperson was later kicked off his own radio show in Edmonton for a comment he made about monkeys, which, to be fair, was unfairly framed as a purposeful racial comment. I've never seen Jesperson demonstrate racism, but when the mob comes for you, you lose, and Jesperson lost. Cherry was canceled. His sidekick, Ron McLean, silently let that happen. McLean was subsequently swarmed, and his career pretty much finished over an inadvertent comment that was considered a gay slur by the woke mob. McLean apologized again and discovered, like so many, the mob is unforgiving. Appeasement, that term, according to Churchill, is feeding the crocodile and hoping it eats you last. And those words of wisdom apply to the woke mob. The mob is nowhere near done with Jesperson yet, and it's still not even easy to tell exactly what he did. So I went back, and I had to go back, and it was on Thursday with Ryan's show. And towards the end of their show, they had a discussion, him and his two producers, over some guy named Captain Kobe. I guess he's a Twitter personality and on TikTok. And he gained a lot of following while he was very much mocking and making fun of the convoy protests in Ottawa and such. So he got a large left-wing following. But then Kobe, I guess, is fundraising, and he wants to travel across the country and interview people with this new platform of his, and he wants to talk to Indigenous people and get their stories, he says. Well, Jesperson's producer, Sarah, she also, of course, has the appropriate gender pronouns in her profiles and says she's a settler. Well, that's upsetting. And to a lot of other woke people, it was upsetting. This Captain Kobe guy, because, and they say it outright, and Sarah says it outright, his producer and others, he's a white man. He has no place interviewing and talking to First Nations people. He shouldn't even be so bold as to dare go out and do that. It went into this weird, bizarre conversation, and it got quite heated. And they went on about the Kardashians and how we have people with, small brains with large social media followings and how they shouldn't have them. I don't know how you stop them. Jesperson, again, was being kind of reasonable. In some ways, he was saying, just block and move on. You don't have to follow these people. You don't have to watch these people. And I guess, well, there was a couple of things that happened. Jane told me about that. I wasn't paying attention, but one of the things during that debate was Jesperson did step on his producer, Sarah, a couple of times. He interrupted a few times. He talked over her a few times. And of course, as those of us who have been married, we do understand, and we don't see the warning signs. I'm as oblivious as Jesperson. And when you could watch this movie and you already know the ending, you could see Sarah getting more and more upset, and he's not having a clue that what's going on and what's happening and how she's getting ready to explode. Didn't see the warning signs. I mean, at one point she basically said a version of fine. Okay, everybody who's been with a woman before knows when they say fine, it means anything but. So this built. And then Friday morning, the next day, this still goes on. And they're still all upset. And they have another 10-minute discussion. Whatever. He gets on to the next guest. He thought it was calm. And as I said, in the afternoon, suddenly, before he's about to have a guest, she blows up, hijacks his show, goes off on just a rage, stomps out of the studio. And the rest, well, we're seeing his history in the making. We don't know if and when his show is going to come back over all of this. Those paintings you can see in the background behind Sarah there, the picture was being shown, those are actually donated by an artist who was putting them up on the walls. That artist has since put up a sanctimonious letter saying, I want my art back. I can't support this show. He said it in a polite way, but even that's getting pulled down. And of course, being so virtue signaling, which is what the woke do, he had to make sure to pin that up there in a big open letter while he's at it. So, I mean, Jesperson's people is following his woke mob. It shows how quickly they will turn on you in a second if you cross those lines. Joining them doesn't make you immune, guys. And Ryan, this will be your second career cancellation going on. And for what? For what? For next to nothing. A bit of a blow up in the studio. I mean, you have things. You have workplaces. You have things that go on. If I guess if Nico and I had a dispute and a big fight, we would probably talk about it off the air and iron it out. Or he'd beat me up or whatever, but we wouldn't have a blow up in the middle of the show. She should have been fired, not apologized to. It was completely unprofessional, but that's his show. Hey, do what you want. We'll see how that goes. We don't need to go out of our way to be offensive, but we have to stop trying to feed the cancel mob. They're moving from person to person, career to career. They're heartless, self-righteous, and tireless once they start swarming. Their hateful hunger for the blood of the unworthy is insatiable. And they'll never hesitate to eat their own, as we're seeing with Jesperson. There's only one defense that works with the mob. That's to ignore them, block them, and move on. There's another way it's put. I think I've seen a meme, just like a dog, once you've done some business in the yard, kick a bit of grass on it and move on. Now the mob owns Jesperson. If that show does get going again, and if Sarah is still in the room with him, it is now Sarah's show, no matter what the name of the show is. It's the Ryan, Real Talk with Ryan Jesperson. No, it's Sarah's show because she'll own him. She'll own the show. The mob will own them. And eventually Sarah will say something wrong and they're going to turn on her and cancel her too. And it's really sad because alternative media, left and right, is growing, and shows like Jesperson are important to have that other point of view and discussion platform. But if they're going to go into that crazed cancel culture woke mob, they deserve what they've fostered. That's how I'm starting the week off. We'll keep watching that schmozzle as it develops throughout the week. So let's check in. We got a whole lot of news actually to cover this week too. So I better bring Dave into studio here. Hey, there's Dave Naylor. How's it going, Dave?
Good morning, Cory. Yeah, I think you're right. I'd sure pick Nico in a fight.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty marshmallow soft. I hope it doesn't come to that at any point.
Yeah. Did Jane have fun at the protests on the weekend?
Not as much fun as she would, Jane's a good sport and likes getting out, but it's not her game. So credit due for her putting up with me and my ventures.
Good. All right. Well, we've got an incredible amount of news already posted this morning, Cory. Our new parliamentary bureau down in Ottawa is now operating on full steam. And we've welcomed Christopher Oldcorn today. He's now our man in Saskatchewan. He's based full-time in Regina. So we've already got, like I said, a dozen stories up. And that's the benefit of having people working in different time zones. Leading off the website right now is a story on the federal employers have launched a review of vaccine mandates. This is when anybody employed by a federal corporation had to be vaccinated, and almost 1,100 people refused to join in, and they're going to maybe get their jobs back because it's being reviewed. Speaking of which, CNRL has lifted their vaccine policy. Big controversy last year when they first brought it in. Lots of lawsuits launched. Well, guess what? They've suddenly stopped and reversed. CP Rail, of course, on strike. 3,000 Teamsters making the news. Our new Saskatchewan guy, Oldcorn, has got a story up on how it's going to affect Saskatchewan specifically. And they're big on grain and potash there, of course. So that could be problematic. Rachel down in Ottawa has done a national overlook story on how negotiations are going and how we came to this situation. Amanda's got a story on a new report showing that Canada is an absolute haven for money laundering, basically because of weak federal government laws. People are starting to realize that, hey, bring your money here and you'll be good as gold. You remember years ago, the feds brought in a oil spill plan that was supposedly the best in the world. Well, guess what? It's not, and it's barely mediocre. So Matt Harwood has got a story out on that from Ottawa. The 8th candidate has entered the Tory leadership race. MP Dalton has made the announcement yesterday on Twitter. And speaking of races, your former guest there, Cory, Mr. El Nega, has entered the race officially. The National Newspaper Awards have taken the name off one of their sports writing awards because of the background of the Globe writer that it was named after. We used to refer to Indigenous women as squaws, and so they've stripped him of his name. And customs agents at Canadian airports, Cory, could soon be packing pistols due to the proliferation of organized crime within Canadian airports, and they think they should have guns to help them deal with it. So we've got that. I know I'm not going to steal Mel's thunder from your show coming up, but we'll have a good exclusive out of that coming up later on today. So all that already and lots more to come, Cory.
Right on, Dave. Thanks. Yeah, there was quite a load of news to kick off the week here. As I said, with these new reporters popping up all across the country for us, we're really filling up the standards. So thanks for the update.
No worries. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. All right. So there's that reminder, we got these new reporters. We got these stories coming up. As Dave said, it was like 17 of them went up today or something like that already. And of course, we're still working on them and more of them are coming out. Make sure you've got a subscription. That's how we can do this. This is how we can get that independent direct news to you. Subscribe at westernstandardonline.com. Take out a membership. Use the coupon code TRIGGERED. Hey, everybody wants to save a few bucks. I understand that as well as anybody. You'll save $10 that way. And if you take out an annual one, it's $99. So, take off that other 10 with Triggered. And hey, you're laughing. A good, well-priced subscription for all of this content. Look at the amount of news that's coming out. People on the ground. It's not cut and paste as some of the newer alternative media sites are that just put up press releases and put their name on top and bottom of it. This is good, unique content. So get out there and try it out. And it's a free trial for 2 weeks. You got nothing to lose. And you will find it well worth it. People who tried it for a couple of weeks tend to stay on. Also, sponsors are important to us, and that's how we can keep going too. We don't take any tax dollars. We will not. We qualify for them now, but we won't take them. And because of that, though, we need those sponsors. We need your subscribers. And Bitcoin Well has been a great sponsor for us for quite some time now. They offer a great service. And if you're looking into digital currencies, you're want to check them out, you want to get involved with them, these are the guys to help lead you into it. They're a reputable Western Canadian company. That's the thing. People worry about their funds. Of course, it seems that the whole world's full of people trying to rip you off, trying to get your money out of your pocket that you've worked so hard to earn. Bitcoin Well is a publicly traded company in the West. You can talk live. You can have sit-downs, one-on-one, white glove service with a person to lead you into the digital currency world, so you can put some funds into there safely and have control of your money all the time. That's the important thing. We're learning about this. It's so new, these digital currencies. And of course, people are apprehensive. Well, Bitcoin Well, that's what they're there for, is people like you and me who we're still just learning what this digital currencies are all about. And they will show you step by step how to get into it. Or maybe it's not your thing, but that's the place to go find out. BitcoinWell.com. Take control of your money. All right, before we get to Mel, let's look at some of these comments. Lee Tomlinson in Lacombe. What are you doing up there, Lee? Natalie saying, Jean Charest, no thanks. I understand, but I plan on having every candidate for the leadership on. I mean, it's important that, we get each and every one of them on, and people make their minds up. He's not going to be the most popular with Western conservatives, I'm sure, but at least he's taking the time to come out and chat and gives that open dialogue to us. Stunnery, the newest comment, never apologize if you didn't genuinely harm anyone. Yeah, that's the truth of it. If you really didn't hurt somebody, don't apologize. You're just giving it to them there. What else we got coming up here? The hottest garbage take she's ever seen. What, mine? I don't know. Whatever. That's fine. We get all sorts on here. So yes, and thank you for tuning in. I just like going through the comments, scroll, and see what we've got going on before we move on to other things. The UCP, that's something, Dave didn't touch on. So it sounds like they're changing a lot of the rules going into the leadership coming up, and we're going to be following that. That was released. It looks like there may be multiple spots to vote, and we will pick those up as they get officially put in. I believe a committee's meeting on that, and of course we're going to report on all of those things as soon as they break. The bottom line is it sounds like there's just such a massive amount of people. I believe the last number I heard was 13,000 or 13,500 people planning to go out and vote in that leadership review. I mean, it's unheard of. How on earth could they squeeze that many people into a review in one small city at one hotel on a 7-hour period, I think is what they had proposed. So something does have to change with the motivations where, of course, a lot of people will read in and whatnot. Cheryl saying mail-in ballots are okay for federal elections, but not for the UCP vote. No, and that was a lot of the big battles before when this whole thing got triggered. Most of the constituency associations who wanted this vote to go wanted it to be at least some sort of online or mail-in or remote sort of ballot sort of system. And the Premier's supporters very much wanted it, if it had to happen at all, to be an in-person thing where you can really limit and control, or at least you would think. But when you now have 13,000 people showing up, it sounds like nobody's really necessarily limiting or controlling this thing whatsoever. It is most definitely taken off. And Daryl's saying, Dave forgot to mention that, Daryl, that Tarek El Naga is running for the leadership of the Maverick Party. Dave did mention that, actually, and there's a story in the Western Standard about it. So we're going to have Mel in studio here in just a moment. We're going to run a video to help kick that off and see some of what Melanie enjoyed and endured at the protests last Saturday, and we're going to talk about that for a little while.
Okay, and fair enough. So, but the social responsibility, though, if everyone is able to spread or carry, the social responsibility of it being a mandate. What's your thoughts on that?
When it was at its peak, I completely understand why there was the mandate. I completely understand why it was put in from public places. And I mean, now that things are easing and that the strains aren't as serious, I do get also why they're easing the mandates, right? Yeah. It's just, I think, part of the process of dealing with a public pandemic.
Don't push me.
Don't push me. You're in my space.
I'm standing here.
Do you not see the sign right here that says 6 feet?
I'm standing here.
Okay, sorry. I'm really trying to hear you.
This must be really difficult to deal with for you.
Well, you know what? I really am trying to give a voice, and it seems irresponsible that I can't have a conversation with a resident in the neighborhood and hear you. So, do you want to come over here again? Sorry.
Route that they're taking, right?
I'm just getting absolutely surrounded.
Yeah. So,
If you want to talk, you can talk to her.
Yeah.
Well, I just am trying to talk with this fella, and I'm getting surrounded by people who are not even respecting any kind of
Oh, they're not
proximity. What's that?
They're not with you guys?
No, they're not. I'm just trying to talk with this fella who's talking with me, but these guys are not giving me any space.
Okay.
And that's okay, even though the
Oh, it's a
sign
public
here,
park.
even though the sign says practice physical distancing. Yeah, but I'm asking you to do this, asking you to ask them to do the same for us. Okay, well, let's do that.
Perfect.
All right, thank you.
Okay, well, that looks like that was fun there. Melanie, welcome to the studio. This is our first one in, actually, with the newer expanded, so we're not squashed in with each other.
Yeah, it's very nice.
And you had an interesting weekend. So that was you attempting to get comments from the counter protesters.
Yeah, that's right. So we went to where they typically gather, which was at the Lougheed House, and literally were there to literally hear people. We wanted to talk to people. We wanted to hear what their suggestions were for a solution to this, and immediately we were met with hostility, and it continued to the point where they were so in our space. They were they were trying to get music playing into my microphone so that people would, so we wouldn't be able to publish it on our social media channels. And they were, sort of cramming and ramming phones and whatnot into our faces, and really getting into the personal space enough where one of them did end up pushing me, which I asked them not to push me. But what I think was the most disappointing for me was there were two police officers that were very close by to everything that was happening. They were watching us literally get swarmed. We were swarmed by anywhere from 3 to 5 people at any given moment. And they were reaching in our personal space. There were a couple of community residents that did want to talk. They did want to be heard. And so that's who I was interviewing. And it got to the point where I went to the police and just asked, can you help? Can you at least ask these people to give me some personal space here? They just shrugged. They just kind of, oh, well, we thought they were with you. And I said, well, it's pretty obvious that they're not with us. They're causing quite an uncomfortable situation here. And I was very disappointed that basically the only thing the police did in that instance, when I was asking them to assist or intervene, or even just speak to these people to give me some personal space, I was basically told, well, then you should leave the park.
Yeah, and it's intimidating when you get that coming in from all directions like that.
Yeah.
You do want to feel like some of these people can be.
There were times where it was very aggressive, and you didn't see it in this video, but we will have sort of a summary of some video clips from everything that transpired through the weekend events. But you'll see they were literally accosting our cameraman. They were physically getting into his face. I mean, I'm talking about like to the point where my face was almost like hit by phones a number of times. So really uncomfortable. And, I tried to make it really clear why we were there. We were there to really speak to them and wanted to hear from some of them, and some of them did speak. But yeah, it was quite aggressive.
Yeah, well, and it does go both ways. Dave Naylor was down there as well, and there was a video clip some other lunatic posted because he was chasing Dave around and getting on his case and in his face, and that was from the pro-freedom protesters. I guess Dave wasn't, the Western Standard still wasn't quite conservative enough for him, so I can imagine what this gentleman wanted to see.
Yeah.
But there is a real trend in mistrust of media in general. I mean, it's coming from the left and it's coming from the right. I mean, at these protests, nobody seems to be welcome anymore to cover them.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing. It just, being there to cover this, you were just sort of lumped in with the rest of the protesters, either side. It didn't matter. And we have another clip of when the police, some tension was high at when everything was wrapping up at the Central Memorial Park, and it sort of centered around what looked like a white supremacist flag, people taking offense to that. It got tense, and so police started to just push people out. And we have another clip where the RCMP are using sort of the bicycle group.
RCMP.
Or sorry, not RCMP, CPS, using the bicycles to sort of push protesters out of the park. And so we were complying and moving as we were reporting. And then I ended up getting sort of pushed. You can play the clip, Nico. I ended up getting pushed and pushed sort of backwards into and then a police horse came up alongside behind me, and which I didn't recognize. I was just trying to get out of the way of the bikes, and ended up getting booted by this police officer on a horse, just for trying to get out of the way. It was.
We'll run that video and then have a look just to show a little bit of the chaos down there.
Mm-hmm. So we're just kind of seeing here what. Again, it seems like there's an altercation happening, and the police are really just trying to keep a barrier between the Freedom Rally protesters and the community protesters. Community protesters are just across the street here. Well, I guess we'll make sure we don't get kicked by a police officer on a horse. So just trying to get out of the way. So that was kind of an interesting situation where I really was getting pushed in a certain direction, and then had an officer come alongside me and literally with his foot in his stirrup just kicked me.
Yeah, well, I try to look at a bit about the police are trying to keep the two sides from actually meeting, though, and getting into what could be a conflict. It was interesting, and I'm glad you got down there to see face to face that a great deal of those counter protesters had nothing nice in mind. They're masked up. It's the usual Antifa guys. Let's face it. I'm certain there were some residents who were concerned about things.
And there were.
You get those professional protesters. They want to, and that's why they don't want to be covered and seen, because they don't want to be seen showing the instigating as they will. Yeah,
and I think that's what I could say. I definitely noticed there was a real difference in the presence of the actual residents. I did get to speak with some, and you know what? Their concerns are legitimate. They don't want to have to compromise their peace in their community every Saturday. Fair enough. Our questions to them were, what's a good solution for you? How about these protests take a different route? How about they go to City Hall, which they did end up doing on Saturday, to go to the areas that make more sense of where the decision makers are, where the courts, maybe even the McDougall Center, not through the Beltline every time. And that makes logical sense to me. But you could definitely tell there was a contingent of people that were not there to talk. They were not there to be heard. They were there to be aggressive.
Well, that's it. And the police, again, I know it's hard to be gentle, though, when moving a crowd. You want to be authority. You don't want to hurt somebody, but you have to be firm. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate. Yep. They should be taken care of. But those horses are huge, as you saw them. They are big and they're well trained, but they also would worry. If you startled the horse or whatever, you could get stomped on, and that could be a lot worse than a police officer's boot. So it might have been a bit of a rough way to do it, but clearing it for a bit of your own safety too.
Yeah.
But still, it was a tense circumstance. Like just where I was, we were down there, a few of us. I went and set up where the march usually goes, and the police were all lined up and they were ready to block it. And then the march decided to go a different direction, and they went downtown, right?
Yeah, they went downtown and then marched to City Hall, which I think is again just more of a reasonable location, right?
A little more appropriate.
And less residential, which I think is important too. I think these people have a right to have the peace in their neighborhood. There was an altercation that happened where looked quite a violent takedown of one of the protesters from the freedom protesters, and we're actually going to be speaking with the person that was taken down by police this afternoon at some point. Hopefully we'll have that on the air this evening, and we have a clip from that as well.
Yeah, well, we'll run that at the end.
Okay, for sure.
Here to show kind of where things unfortunately degraded to, because that was there's a bit of a timeline that happened. It was the normal gathering in the downtown park, or at Central Memorial, and then the counter protesters were at a different park. because the police had blocked the normal marching path, the freedom protesters decided to march to City Hall.
Mhm.
So I thought something that was striking as I saw some footage from outside across from City Hall, a lot of the counter protesters followed them and went and set up and counter protested them there, which says a lot. Again, so this isn't residents. I mean, they're out of the neighborhood. What's your concern? They're gone. Why are you still coming? Because they wanted to make trouble. They
Yeah.
had a beef that was bigger than.
Yeah. Well, and what I will say too is when we went to the Lougheed Park to speak with community residents and the anti-protesters, a lot of the people that were across the street from City Hall were not at that park. It seemed like there was a bit of a different group that had accumulated there. It looked like there might have been a couple of people from the park there, but it seemed like a completely different group.
But they did come to that to
Yes.
confront the freedom protesters.
Absolutely,
anyways.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's how things are kind of getting a little more out of control in a way. I mean, it's worrisome because as these go on, you kind of got a smaller and smaller group participating of people that tend to be a little more dedicated, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
And I know I've been to them. 99% of the people are peaceful, but on both sides, there's always an element of people who just want trouble. And unfortunately, as these marches get smaller, that group's going to get a little more dominant.
Yeah, I agree with you there for sure. And I think really, if you look at the history of this, like we as the Western Standard have covered a number of the rallies. We've streamed a couple. I have been to some along with our operations manager, James. We've watched the events unfold, and I would say they have been peaceful. I have not seen massive unrest until now, until this pushback from community residents. And again, this is not a blame statement. I understand the real residents that are disturbed by this every Saturday have a right to peace in their community. So understand that. But I think you're right. I think based on what I've seen, there seems to be a contingent in that representation group that is looking to stir the hornet's nest, right? And I think it doesn't help the way some city councilors are speaking towards these protests, how even some of the police are speaking towards the protest. I think that's also causing some inflammation.
Yeah, there's been a lot of divisive rhetoric, unfortunately, that inflames things and gets people going. A lot of insulting. I know it drives me nuts when they keep throwing it out. This is a racist group. This is whatever this protest has. There's probably a handful of racists among them. When you get a few thousand people together, there's going to be something in the group. But as far as the movement goes, that's not happening at all. And every time every person who took part in it gets called that, they get more and more upset. I don't blame them.
Well, I was even called it when I was in the park trying to speak to people. Somebody said it to me. I asked them a number of times to define it. Why? What action am I doing that would constitute you calling me a white supremacist? But they didn't want to have that dialogue. So
no, they just throw it up blindly. But it does inflame things, get worse.
Absolutely.
I think so. There were some speakers at City Hall when that got going. I think I heard one of them at one point talking though that the next week they might be going to Princess Island or somewhere. The bulk might move on from the Beltline.
That's what I've heard too.
That would ease a lot of pressure off of this entire ongoing thing, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that, I think that is the respectful thing to do. I understand, that the idea behind some of the anti-protest is, you don't really have anything to protest anymore because the mandates are lifted. Well, for millions of Canadians, they have not been lifted and they are still impacted on a daily basis, whether personally or professionally. So their right or the feeling of their right to continue to protest is there. And it seems legitimate for what they're facing. But you're right. I think that there needs to be consideration for how that's impacting the city, where, who it's impacting, and, get it out of the Beltline that has had to deal with this for months.
And even the costs as taxpayers. I mean, to be blunt, there was hundreds of police officers down there with horses and bikes and the works. It costs a bundle. This is overtime. Plus, at the same time, when you've got hundreds of police officers down there, that means other parts of the city aren't being as well covered for police services as they normally would.
Yeah, that's right.
If it was contained in Princess Island Park or somewhere like that, you wouldn't need such a large presence. It would just be better for everyone. I know not some people are going to disagree, but.
Well, and I'm sure the residents in and around that area are probably not going to be happy per se. But, I think the idea if they can find solutions to places that are a little less residence based, I think would be helpful for many.
Absolutely. And again, there were some conflicts, before you head out here. There was other conflicts with a gentleman who got arrested, a couple of arrests that happened. You'll be speaking with him later. So can you frame up a bit of what happened there?
Well, what I understand is there was some dialogue going back and forth between the freedom protesters and the police. In fact, there had been a few altercations that had happened between the freedom protesters and the anti-protesters that were raising tension. And so when the police started moving people out of the park, there was conversation happening between the police and protesters. And at one point it looked like, and what I've been told was that police sort of reached over the bike line of officers and grabbed one of the protesters, ended up pulling a hoodie or a sweater off of him. And then I think you can kind of see from some of the video that he is, at some point, somebody gets a hold of him, and then a number of officers get a hold of him and get him and wrestle him down to the ground. I have actually spoken with this person. They have said that they were not resisting and were speaking out loud that they were not going to be resisting, but yet said that 6 to 8 officers were still pinning him down, and he ended up being tasered at some point. So we're going to find out a little bit more of the background of what happened and why it got to the level that it did. Again, I know, police were there to try to make sure that people were safe. At this point, there was a large distance between the freedom protesters and the resident protesters. So we'll get a little bit more information about exactly what happened to lead to that takedown.
Yeah, well, look forward to that interview, and we'll see more details on what's happened and talk to some people. And maybe we'll run that arrest video right now while you move back to the newsroom to carry on scribbling away as you do. And I appreciate you coming in to talk about your weekend at the park.
Oh, yes, it's fun. We'll be back there next week.
Hey, thanks, Mel.
Stop touching him! Hey! Stop touching him! You are useless. Hey!
Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Yo, what the fuck? Move! Give him his stuff back. What the fuck is wrong with you?
What the hell was that? Hey, what the hell was that?
Hey! What the fuck? What did he do? What did he do? What did he do? Tell me what he did. Why do you need 6? Look at what they're doing to him. Look at this shit. Look, you stripped his fucking shirt off. Look at this shit.
You better never wear a fucking poppy ever again, you fucking piece of shit.
I hope you guys can sleep at night.
Yeah, keep laughing, you fat fuck.
What the fuck is wrong with you? Oh my god. Look at what they're doing to him. Do your fucking job. No, it's not. Don't fucking touch me. Don't you fucking touch me. Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me. Does that look fucking peaceful to you?
Yeah, I guess I should have given a bit of a language warning, especially if you're listening at home with the volume turned up. Sorry about that. But yeah, that's at those tense sorts of circumstances, you do get a lot of harsh words. It looks like quite a rough situation. It was disturbing seeing the way that one officer looked to be swinging down at the gentleman on the ground. But I don't know. There's no gentle way to arrest people typically. It's hard to say how compliant the individual was. But Melanie will be talking to him later, and we'll get some more details on just what happened there and whatever the charges might have been afterwards as well. I'm going to speak about one of our sponsors before we get rolling here, and that is the Canada Shooting Sports Association. These guys have been sponsoring us for some time now. One of the things I talked to Jean Charest about in the next interview coming up, actually, was his stance on the reclassifying of some hunting rifles as assault-style weapons and things like the Liberals have been doing. The Canada Shooting Sports Association, their name says it all. They are an association for people who enjoy firearms, whether you're a collector, hunter, target shooter, whatever. It's your business. It's your property. And it should be protected like anything else. If you're a law-abiding citizen, as I know you are, You should be left alone. And you need those resources, though, because we got to stand up for our rights. As we saw, the Liberals will turn around. They recategorize what used to be a legal firearm that was completely harmless, and suddenly it's illegal. They've turned you into a criminal, and you have to turn it into the government. I see they've kicked that can down the road because they're having some legal troubles with it, which is great. And that's part of what the Canada Shooting Sports Association is doing. They've got a number of legal challenges out right now, pushing back against the government, saying, hey, you've overstepped. We're standing up for ourselves, and we're using our courts to do it. But they need your help. So you got to Google them out, Canada Shooting Sports Association, and join up, take out a membership, or as you can see, it's CSSA-CILA.org. And I mean, they have all sorts of other resources for you as an association anyways, but the most important, I think, is standing up for your ability to continue to safely use and enjoy firearms. And they're a good sponsor. So check them out, please, and stand up for yourself, guys. So, yeah, getting on to the protests a bit more here and what Mel was talking about. I see Marvin Sherry Stewart saying they aren't camping in tents, at least. Yeah, that's true. And that was a thing, though, that when you let things, though, go too far and too long, if we remember the Occupy protests from 10 years ago, if you want to have a good chuckle, Google Cory Morgan and Occupy, and you'll see some pictures of me getting taken away from the Occupy protest downtown by the police. I wasn't part of it. I was actually sort of in a humorous way counter-protesting what they were up to. But the issue that happened there too was it was a protest that perhaps had some meaning, had some basis to it, and it stayed for way too long. And eventually it festered and it got too far, and it took months to get those guys out of there. And finally, you know, when they were starting to get overdoses and they were getting sexual assaults happening, and this wasn't just in Calgary, it was everywhere where these tent cities were. Cities finally moved on them, but they really didn't want to. But the problem, that the fear with these as well, these freedom protests, is I know some people say it's just an annoyance, and it is. But if you live down there, I mean, I was at those earlier ones, and it goes on for a couple hours. If you're in an apartment, and I mean, some of those trucks, they got like train horns on them. I mean, they'll rattle your windows. And if you're doing it week after week after week after week in a residential area, I know it's not the end of the world, but I can see why it's irritating for some people. And, you know, Princess Island's a little more appropriate. I mean, the only restrictions remaining now are federal. So why take it out in a residential city neighborhood? I know it's close to downtown. It's just time to consider taking some pressure off. We're seeing how much more tense it's getting, how bad it's getting. Somebody might get really hurt soon. And we don't want to see that. And, you know, we might see some conflict. These counter protesters, as some others are putting out, they're Antifa and the usual losers. We know that. You know, some of the people at the counter protest were concerned residents, but the ones in the front now, they're the usual losers who get out, the extreme leftists who want to start riots, want to start problems, want to get in people's faces. And that's what they were there to do. And that's why even at City Hall, they were over there counter protesting. Well, it has nothing to do with the Beltline when you're way over there. So these clowns follow them. But as we keep running these protests, though, on and on and on down there, this is going to get worse, and the city has to act. So it sounds like they're looking to move to a more appropriate area to carry on, because they have every right to protest. But eventually you push that right to a point where it's impacting on other people too much. It has to go. And I think they're hitting that point now. And let's hope that things get a little more settled, I guess you could say. And I like what they've done. I like what the protests have done. I think it's very important. One of the things I think is great from the truckers convoy and the other protests and things, it does remind the government too. They know, you know, people are starting to wind down. There's still federal ones to push back against. There's still some issues going on. Most of them are gone. And governments know if they bring back the masking, if they bring back the vax passports, they bring back all that crap, these protests are going to be back in a heartbeat. People are not going to put up with it this time. That's been clearly established. And we have to thank the people who got up and protested before to establish that and make it clear. And that's what protest is about. It's important. It's very important. But again, it can't start to turn disparate and directionless. And it's at risk of going there at this point. But we watch it closely. As we saw, Melanie gets out there on the ground. Talk about gutsy, you know, for a little reporter getting among some hostile people. And thankfully, she wasn't hurt or stepped on by a horse or anything like that. Or those idiots, you know, putting their phones in her face didn't knock it. I mean, it's serious stuff. We see that with other reporters too, you know. So they've been assaulted. Sheila Gunn-Reid got assaulted a number of times. These guys do not like it. And we saw it on the other side. There's a clip. It's on Twitter. But Dave Naylor was out there, and some whack ball was chasing, kind of following him around and getting on his case because something he disagreed with. Said he had a bone to pick and was trying to intimidate him. Dave, for the most part, ignored him. But, you know, media gets a rough ride at these protests from both sides. Part of it's because a lot of the mainstream media has been pretty bloody rotten over the course of this whole pandemic, and people are sick and tired of it, and they're pushing back. Stop about police and finance. Get your reps out to speak to the protesters, Penny Mason says. Well, that's what we did. We're showing you live video from it. How much do we got to go? We had 5 people down there all day Saturday, including myself. Of course we're doing that. But I do talk about the realities of the other things. It is costing us a pile of money. That's just another factor in it. We still got to talk about it. And, you know, it's important. I mean, these are other pressures. Hey, as I said, I'm a person, I owned a bar. It got robbed repeatedly because of a contributing factor of it was the very slow police response times in the area that I'm in. And these are other things to keep in mind. If these protests draw that much police presence into a downtown spot, not every criminal is a moron. I think most of them are. But some of them will realize, hey, this is a good time to pull off my next crime, break into my next place, rob the next store. So these all come with a price. And I know it's not the fault of the freedom protesters. It's because the counter protesters get down there. But let's get reasonable then. If it's escalating and escalating, then maybe it's time to move somewhere else. It's not saying stop. It's saying use reason. Because if you dig your feet in, I tell you what, your public support is going to evaporate. And it gets lesser and lesser every time. And when you fully lose the public support, you've lost what you're even doing this for. And would say, yeah, you know, Cheryl's saying, so here's part of why the mainstream media doesn't get a good rap. They asking the police chief why David Pawlowski wasn't arrested for speaking at the rally. You know, they want to see arrests. They want to see more of that going on, and they like to press and push on things. Let's see what else we got. You know, people are criminals. Cop was laughing. Yeah, there was a rough thing there. Charest coming on, must leave. Well, if you can't even watch them, that's your prerogative. I'm going to interview every guest, every candidate who runs for this. It's part of multiple coverage. I'm sorry that it's that out of your liking, but you know, that's what we do. It's not for everybody. That's fair enough. Construction goes on in cities every day and makes a ton of noise. Don't see that shut down. Yeah, but construction comes to an end and it serves a purpose. And these guys don't seem to have an end in sight, and the purpose is starting to get harder to see. You know, you can keep pushing, but I'm just saying, for your own sake, for the guys going out, you're going to fail in the long run. Eventually get smaller and smaller, and there's going to be a violent outbreak, and the public is really going to turn against you, and you've lost a lot of the ground you gained. So just move to another spot. It's not that hard. There's a big downtown in a lot of places you can go without bothering citizens. Cheryl, Don asking, why did I find out why Jean bailed on my interview? No, and I don't care. I don't need to speak to him. He can do his thing and whatever. But we will speak to most politicians and things like that. We may even be moving into a leadership race with the UCP. I mean, if Premier Kenney doesn't make it through the review, it doesn't work out for him, we're going to be into a leadership race. And candidates, of course, a lot of them be coming on because a lot of UCP members watch the Western Standard. And it's unfortunate Mr. Jean won't have the opportunity to speak to them through my show. But that's just the way things happen sometimes. So he can go knock doors and talk at CTV, I guess, or something. But yes, let's see. It is necessary to interview everyone who's running. Is it? Yeah. Otherwise, I'll be no better in the mainstream media. Yeah, you know, we just got to give it balance. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to vote for them. And it was, you'll see in a few moments when I do run that, it was a good conversation with Mr. Charest. You know, he's certainly too red for my tastes. I don't own a party membership anymore. Were I to choose to take part in those things again, I can't see him being the one who draws my vote. But he's no fool, and he's got some common sense in him, and he's certainly got a lot of experience behind him, and it's worth listening to. And I mean, we're going to watch this campaign evolve, and as we get more and more guests on, I'm looking forward to interviewing all of them. We'll get those different voices, and hopefully we'll have them on a second time or a third time, and you know, go from there. Somebody saying Jean lost a family member a few days ago and is grieving. Well, he stood me up prior to that. Either way, why is Rempel backing Patrick Brown? Well, that you would have to ask Michelle Rempel, to be honest. I don't know. And I'm hoping to have Patrick Brown on the show, though, and we'll talk with him as well. I'm going to talk to every one of them, and it's very important. That's where these discourses are. And you know, some people say I should get a little rougher on them. I asked some good pointed questions you'll see in a moment, and definitely from a Western perspective, because you're not going to get those questions from central media outlets. You won't. So we got those, and I'll give those questions to the other candidates too, and you'll get a perspective that you wouldn't get elsewhere from these candidates, and some questions they probably would rather not even have wanted to go into. But at least they're coming out and they're talking to us, and it's important. And I appreciate that. So, yeah, as we're saying, I'm just looking at that news story with the 13,000 Conservative members. Right. So, I think without further ado, though, it is about time to put on the conversation I had with Conservative Party of Canada leadership candidate Jean Charest, and we'll talk a little more after that interview is done. So, stay tuned here, guys. And it was a good talk. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me today, Mr. Charest. We really appreciate it. And hearing from you out west, you kicked off your campaign out here in Calgary. We don't have anybody at this point in the Conservative leadership race from the west, so of course we have concerns, and that's where a lot of the questions are going to land today.
Well, and I'm your Western candidate. If that's the case, I'm happy to fill the bill for Western Canada, Cory.
Okay, well, we'll see how that goes. So, I mean, I'll start with one of the questions I got from a viewer the other day when I'd said you were going to be coming on. Some people are looking forward to it, but she was concerned, of course, out here, the firearm legislation, things like that. It's been going on since the 90s when you were in Parliament. And with some of the cabinet recently admitted, like with some of the rifle bans, some of it overlapped and took on some hunting rifles and things such as that, as opposed to assault style is what the goal was. It was Carol Seville was asking about that. And we're wondering, would you be looking at revisiting perhaps to make sure that firearms legislation is remaining a little more fair to people who have been legally using firearms?
Cory, the focus of the federal government on firearms should be handguns in cities like Toronto and Montreal, and working at the border to stop those handguns from coming into the country. That's where we should put our money and resources, and not target, hunters or farmers in northern Alberta. And so on the legislation itself, I think we would need to look at what it does exactly to make sure it's efficient, and not just for the pleasure of trying to further legislate. So I would think that we would want to put together, maybe because it's done on a regulatory basis, there has to be a better control and a more rigorous control of who makes decisions on what it is exactly that we want to ban. And instead of just addressing appearances, why don't we address the real fundamental issue, which is handguns in cities?
Okay, I think that's what a lot of people wanted to hear. There was a bit of a knee-jerk, I think, response, and some things get banned, and it's not necessarily actually impacting anybody except law-abiding firearm owners.
Yeah.
So getting on to another policy then that's quite big out here of concern is the carbon tax, of course. That was a large dividing issue with the Conservative Party in the last couple of years, and it's certainly a strong issue with us in the West. Energy prices are very high. It's hard on agricultural producers, and whereas BC's had a carbon tax for quite some years now, it doesn't seem to have had an impact on emissions. So where are you standing on a carbon tax or emissions control?
We have to be smart about this, which means a comprehensive climate and energy policy which includes carbon capture and storage, biofuels, hydrogen, blue or green hydrogen, small modular reactors, hydro, all these things, and oil and gas. And the only way to do it, Cory, effectively is if the industry's in the room helping to design it and they buy into it. And the same is true for the provinces. So I'm certainly able to look at a policy and have a policy that has carbon pricing into it. It has to be flexible, simple, flexible enough to avoid increasing the carbon tax as the Trudeau government wants to do on the 1st of April, and it doesn't make sense. And then it should not discriminate against rural Canadians. It cannot be a wealth transfer tax. So we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Alberta has done it. I mean, Alberta has a price on carbon for industrial emitters, and they have a policy that makes sense. So that's the way we need to approach it. And if we approach it that way and deal with the transition, which includes natural gas and will include the use of oil, well, then we'll get to the same objective, but we'll do it in a smart way as opposed to just doing it while excluding industry or excluding the provinces.
Right, yeah, because Western energy producers, I think sometimes haven't gotten enough credit for how much they have innovated and reduced emissions or taken on means of carbon capture, or even taking carbon and turning it into other products. So it'd be good to see that recognized and pursued. So now we've still got the ongoing issue of getting our products to market, and that's been quite a battle going on, whether it's coastal pipelines, east, west, or in any direction. To be frank, how can we get assurances that we're going to still manage to meet those world energy needs? I mean, we may transition away eventually, but for the time being, the world needs a lot of our product right now.
And this conflict in Europe, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia now has shed light on what it is that we should have been doing. And Canada should have been building pipelines. The last pipeline built in Quebec, by the way, was built under my government. I've always been pro-pipeline and pro-oil and gas. And the reason for that is the common sense that we all need to abide by as we see what's happening in Europe in this conflict, where we could be an alternative of oil and gas for Europe, as opposed to being shut out as we are right now. So, but to do that, Cory, requires that there be a prime minister who actually stands up from time to time and says, I'm in favor of a pipeline, as opposed to not or saying anything at all or not supporting the industry. That's what has been sorely lacking in the last few years. And now to have someone like myself, who has been Premier of Quebec, out there saying and defending these things, which I did when I was Premier and when I did when I left office, I think gives us a much more chances of succeeding at getting big projects done than if it were someone else.
Well, there's definitely been an investment chill. I mean, we've had an ideologically driven government for quite some time, and a person doesn't feel confident in investing in a large infrastructure project when it sounds like the federal government wants to pull the rug out from under it. So, I mean, changing that atmosphere would certainly be a good start to improving our production facilities.
It would be. And to get a prime minister who actually stands up and says, this is a good idea, this project should be done, and then says, we'll do it right environmentally, we'll do all the work that needs to be done so that it's environmentally sound, which we can do, and we can do in reasonable delays, and do it in a fashion that is predictable, which in industry, which everyone wants, would be a change, 100% change relative to what we've seen with the Liberal government.
So moving more into regional challenges and issues, Senate reform, again, I was of the old reformers back in the 90s, and Triple E was the big call. I understand reforming the Senate itself would be a very large task to be done. But for the more immediate term, what are your thoughts on appointing senators that have been elected in provinces? It's been something of a tradition for some time, if we do choose to elect them, that often conservative governments will appoint them.
Well, for a while, that's what the federal government was doing. And during the Meach period, where they appointed provincially nominated candidates to the Senate. The Senate, when it was thought and designed, it was to be a house where the provinces were represented. That's the core idea of what the Senate was designed to be. It's not that now. And that's one of the issues that needs to be addressed in the future. The bigger question is, does this mean we reopen the Constitution? I think there's probably other options that would allow the provinces a say in how we nominate senators, and that may be an option that we would look at. I'm open to those ideas. If the province of Alberta brings something forward and says, here is something that we would like to do, I would be very open to that, Cory.
Well, and going farther, though, I mean, we went through that with Charlottetown and Meech Lake, but at some point down the road, are you receptive to looking at constitutional reform in Canada?
Well, it's I don't see now how it can be done because the conditions are not there. I don't, if we undertake a round of constitutional discussions, we do it only if there is a huge and very substantial buy-in and preparation from the provinces. That work has not been done. And I don't see it right now, but that doesn't mean that there are not alternative things that can be done in the meantime that would allow this federal system of ours to work more effectively. And by the way, Cory, that's one of the things I want to bring to this job as leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister. I know how the country operates. I know how this federal system works, and I know how to make it work to get big things done. It would be a breath of fresh air in Ottawa to have a Prime Minister who has that direct experience and able to connect Quebec to Alberta, able to connect the West to the East and Central Canada to make our country work. It's the only way for Canada to be efficient, by the way. And so as a Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party, that would be right up our alley in terms of what we represent, in terms of our views and our values and our history of making this country work.
Okay, and then likewise, I guess in a theoretical example, but something a very recent one, we had that vote in the House of Commons over protecting Quebec's seats no matter what the population distribution would be. I mean, our parliament is supposed to be rep by pop at least. And at that point, we basically seem to have voted to override even that principle, which sort of upset some people out there. I understand it's just a single seat, but that's a big principle. How would you have responded to that if you were in at that time?
Well, there was a second vote to which all the Conservatives voted in favor of that says we could maintain the minimum level of seats in Quebec at 78 and then add, and then you'll get the same outcome. Well, I mean, that's a common sense solution that that the government should have applied, and it avoids reducing the number of seats in Quebec, but also increasing the number of seats elsewhere where the rep by pop should be respected. I mean, isn't that the right solution? Isn't that the one? That's the one the Conservative caucus voted for, and and from my perspective, works well for everyone, including Western Canada.
Well, it does lead to more politicians, which could be a problem for people in general, I guess. But
there's only one thing would be more journalists, but you know, it's not a perfect world, Cory.
No, I understand. Okay, well, going forward, something else, and same thing. You know, I understand the equalization. That's a big issue out here. It is constitutionally entrenched, but it is the government who does maintain, you know, periodically adjusting the formula. And there's been a lot of, you know, concern that the formula really hasn't been well adjusted by Conservative or Liberal governments over the years. And it just seems, no matter how hard times get, Alberta keeps paying in. And when the times are good, we pay in. It's consistent that way, if nothing else. How could we adapt with that?
Well, and first, you're right. I mean, equalization is written into the Constitution, so it's not as though we can just discard it. We have to apply it. How we apply it's the issue. And I went through different debates where on the calculation whether we should or should not include the revenues from non-renewable resources or renewable resources. We have to look at the way it's calculated. That's where the real decision is made. That's where the real impact is felt, and ensure that it's fair. And it has to be revised periodically anyway. I think it's on every 5 years. So let's look at it so that it's fair for everyone, including the people of Alberta and of Western Canada in general. So I've been through the process of revising it, and we've made it better in those days. It's imperfect, but let's look at it with a view of making it fair for everyone, including Alberta.
Okay, now we're getting into some times with foreign relations, of course, between the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and as well with China's really looming as a large power on the world scene. And in my view, Canada's been fairly weak internationally, unfortunately, though traditionally we've been a very respected player on the world scene. How could we reclaim our space, I guess, as a country to be respected in that sense and have a role on the world governance scene?
Well, Cory, Canada is, under this Liberal government, has a weakened position internationally. I mean, we are not the voice that we once were. And let's start with our immediate neighbor, the United States, with whom obviously the relations are not as good as they were. I mean, they are as protectionist as they were under the Biden administration, as they were under the Trump administration. One of the messages coming out of that is that we have to rely on ourselves. We have to diversify trade. We have to do it aggressively. We have to get out in the world more and depend less on the United States. The other part of it is defense, which the terrible conflict in the Ukraine has brought home. I mean, it's heartbreaking for us to watch the reports every day on the news, but what lessons should we draw from that? We need to do more on national defense for ourselves to start with, occupy our north, and not lose sight of the fact that we are neighbors of Russia in the Arctic. We need to occupy our northern territory and to make sure that we are there and not absent as the way we are now. And you know, Cory, even in the Northwest Passage, the Americans do not recognize the Northwest Passage as being Canadian territory. That speaks volumes of the fact that we have to be much more assertive in our foreign policy across the world. It starts with defense, but it also starts by being present in Africa and the Middle East, where we're missing in action in a lot of places in the world, where our interests are at play. Asia is part of that. Now, we do need an Indo-Pacific strategy that puts China in the context of Asia, but not only China. We need to look at the broader Asia area and region, which includes India, which includes ASEAN, which includes Southeast Asia. That's the only way for us as a country to be able to have a strong, relevant presence in those parts of the world.
I appreciate that you brought up Arctic sovereignty. I spent a number of years working up there, actually, and ironically, some government scientists would come to our oil field camps to study because they didn't have the means to get as far north as we did, which is pretty unfortunate when you look at things. You know, the private industry can get up there, but not government-funded things. And we're leaving a big space up there unattended, so it's kind of hard to claim sovereignty if we can't even get to it.
And Stephen Harper made annual trips to the North, and people, sort of poo-pooed it. They thought, well, what's the point? It was very relevant. We look back on that. It establishes a presence that is extremely important in a tangible way. So at least the minimum is that we have to occupy our own territory.
So going a little further, you were talking about international relations with the United States. I'll kind of close out, and it's been a sticking point regionally as well, though. And a sticking point when it comes to trade is supply management, our dairy system and poultry and such. We've had difficulties. They like bringing that up when we do get a trade dispute with the United States. Are you willing to start examining supply management for reform and maybe starting to work our way out of that?
Well, supply management in the industry is very important for the dairy. It's not just dairy; it's poultry, for example, and eggs, and so it's been fairly good for Canada. I understand those who think it's not the best system in the world, but we've already given some on supply management. We did it in the Canada-Europe Trade Agreement. We gave some. We did it on CPTPP. We also gave in to some part of the market there, and we did it on CUSMA in 3 different trade agreements. So the industry and producers have already made some concessions on that front. I wouldn't go any further than the concessions that we've already made now.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I think that's about the time we had with you. Is there more you'd like to add before we let you go? And where can people find information on your campaign?
Cory, I just have one request for you, and that's to support a candidate that's going to allow the Conservative Party to unite and allow the Conservative Party to be the national political party that will win an election campaign, which is what I can do for this country and this party. Thank you, Cory, for hosting me.
Oh, well, thanks for coming on. I hope we can talk again before the end of the campaign. It's going to be a long one, developing, I'm sure, for some time over the next coming months.
Thank you.
So there you go. I saw some people pointing out, yes, unfortunately, it was a recorded interview. It is hard with these candidates when they're mid-campaign to get them pinned down. I always prefer live if I can. Not to mention, I had to sit through that. And as it's well established, I like the sound of my own voice. I can't stand watching myself interview people, but I went through that for you guys. I hope you appreciate it. But that was Jean Charest, of course, candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada. Coming from, I guess, more the establishment side, the central Canadian side, if you want to, the way I put it, the Laurentian elite. But every candidate, he's definitely, you can't dismiss him. He's definitely going to be one of the contenders for the in the race, if not, one of the top ones. So it's better to listen to these guys, talk to these guys, and have candidates and voters put up their choose how they will. The more informed you are, you can only do better, right? I know, a lot of political talk. It was hard to pin specific answers. We'll see. And as the campaign gets going, hopefully I interview each and every one of these candidates. The second round will have a little more pointed and specific stuff to get them with. So thanks to those who did put questions forward. And if I can get them live, I certainly will. Following up on some of that with the comments, though, since there were some that came in. Cheryl saying to run for the leadership, the candidate needs to put up $200,000. Where does all this money go? Something that's even more important than where it goes, actually, is where did it come from? You always want to wonder who's funding them. And that tells you a lot about where they want to go and who they may be beholden to. As far as parties go, well, they'll take in money. They need it. The parties thrive on money. So that'll just go into more party operations, more staffers, more polling, more, you name it. Parties have no end to things where they can spend money. That's no party has a hard time doing that. And that's where it'll go in. There's something I found kind of interesting with the Conservative Party, the United Conservative Party, actually, when they got $100 a pop with all these people now, and it looks like it might be as many as 15,000 or more registering and spending that to take part in this leadership race. It's going to be the most successful fundraiser they've had in a long time. And how good it is for the party as a whole, time will tell. But boy, there's a lot of dollars going in. People are sure willing to put their money where their mouth is on that one. Al Rourke talking about setting up refineries and refining our crude oil and selling it here. Yeah, there's something to that. But again, a lot of it just comes to getting government out of the way when it comes to pipelines, refineries, exploration, wells, oil sands. The main thing is just deregulate, get out. If it makes economic sense, we'll do it. If it makes economic sense to set up a refinery, the private market will do it. But getting a new refinery built is just about as easy as getting a new pipeline into the ground, which means nearly impossible, unfortunately. Let's see what else we've got in the comments. Yes, till Quebec doesn't like it, and that's going to be difficult with Mr. Charest. He's definitely very bold and beholden to Quebec. And how popular he is there, I don't know. You know, he was premier for a number of years, but Quebecers they're as prickly as Albertans when it comes to things, and they might not be thrilled at this point to see Mr. Charest on the political scene again. That'll be an interesting battle going on there. Where are we? I'm just scrolling through the comments here. I don't see anybody you can trust but Pierre Polyev. Well, we'll see. He's another I spoke to already. It's somebody saying, "Oh, they'll take a journalist over a politician." Thanks, Claudette. But yeah, we get too many journalists. The world could get a little rough. You know, Mark saying a bunch of nice words out of him, and I guess out of me. I know some people say I should come in a little harder. We're a newer show. We're getting some good candidates, good guests on, and I want them to be. We can be hard, but I want to make sure to respect them. We want to keep them coming. Because again, some of these questions, he didn't want to talk about supply management. He didn't give much of an answer, but at least he was asked. Equalization, Senate appointments. These candidates don't want to touch those questions, and we got to keep pushing at them with them and make them, put stands on them. And if they don't follow through, well, there's the ongoing problem with politicians in general. You have to start with the questions. Where else have we got here? Boy, a lot of comments. Sorry, guys, I'm just trying to catch up. Who's paying or controlling all these celebrities to boycott RBC for funding pipelines? Yeah, that's an interesting issue, isn't it? All those goofballs coming out there and calling for boycotts of things. Celebrities, I don't know, but she got tied up by work, but Melissa Embarkey, for people who know her, is a First Nations person in Alberta, works in the energy industry as well. Very well spoken. She's been on the show before, and she's very outspoken on Twitter. And we're going to talk about that. I was going to try and get her today, but work, of course, as those of us got to pay the bills, got in her way. So we rescheduled her, and she should be coming on Wednesday. And we're going to discuss just that, because if you see her on her Twitter account as a First Nations person, she's not been very happy about seeing some of these celebrities speaking on her behalf and talking about what's good for her people up in northern BC. As they're pretty presumptuous. These, if we want to keep talking about privilege and so on, we don't get much more privilege than these Hollywood celebrities telling us what to do over in Canada. I'm going to talk briefly about our sponsor one more time. Let's cover that. Bitcoin Well. These guys will go a little further with some of the stuff they can do. Assuming you want to get into digital currencies, you've gone through their stuff. They've got the online academy, Athabasca Ed, they've partnered with, so you could learn. They call it Bitcoin University or Bitcoin Academy, they call it. You can go through some of those, and if you decide it's for you, this is the stuff you want to get into, of course, they'll help you along in it. You always hold control. They're non-custodial. You always have control of your own money. Well, there's all sorts of ways you can utilize it. They've got ATMs all over Western Canada. If you go to their site, you can see Bitcoin ATMs all through the West, and I think there's some in Montreal as well and some other spots. A great map for that. Also, some of the things, if you want savings, they call it set it and forget it. Just be like a car payment or whatever. You can have some money just come out of your account once a month and go into your Bitcoin wallet where it can stay good and secure wherever you're keeping it. And as well, they've got corporate packages, and that's kind of neat. We're doing that here at the Western Standard, and they do it for other companies where it's set up. It's voluntary for employees, of course, but you can have a portion of your salary every month will go into your Bitcoin wallet. And actually, Derek's been quite generous here. He'll match up to a maximum, of course, a portion of what we put in as well. So you get that nice little side savings, and it's trouble-free, and it's kind of almost automatic. And so, you can set that up at your own company for your employees if they want it, or as an employee, maybe ask your boss if you want to set that sort of thing up. Okay, diversify your funds, take control of your money, and Bitcoin Well, these guys will show you how to do it. BitcoinWell.com. All right, let's look into a little bit. Ashley Ellis, celebrities are the biggest abusers of gas and oil. Isn't it great? You have giant yachts flying all over the world, first class, no less. I've walked past first class seats before. They look very comfortable. But then they want to tell us all to tighten their belts. They want to tell us to just, or as Biden said, just drive electric. Can't afford gas? Just go buy a $70,000 electric car and do a $10,000 upgrade to your house and take on another $500 a month in electric bills and drive an electric car. It's easy, isn't it? Why not? These guys are totally disconnected from reality, but unfortunately, they do seem to have an influence. Look at the press they get. These bunch of ding-dongs, these celebrities. Hey, I'm not going to try and tell them how to act. I don't know how to act, man, but I do know politics. I know energy. I know the bush. I know First Nations people. I can speak to those things. These Hollywood hammerheads can't, but they continue to. So, again, I'm looking forward to seeing what Melissa has to say about and to these guys on the show as we get going on that. So let's see some of the other news items. Reid Sirs, he was the ambassador who was in Kabul and took off out of there like a bat out of hell when the Taliban came packed back in there and left 1,250 Canadians behind. So there's a common special committee have summoned him for questioning and asking why he closed the embassy while thousands of Canadians and Canadian allies were pleading for help. Well, these politically appointed ambassadors often aren't necessarily the people of the best character. They're just the people who have the best political connections. I tell you, it's a nice gig if you can get it. I did know somebody who was an ambassador at a location once years ago. We visited. I won't bother with which country and so on, but you live this life, you get a full paid for home, you get the servants, you get the works, and then your salary basically is just going straight into your bank account. It is among some of the top gigs to get if you're a well-connected government person. But when push comes to shove, when it really actually comes to doing your job, you're not just there to renew people's passports if they lost them or things like that, and you've got a conflict like that, and you got a lot of Canadians and Canadian allies in trouble, that's when an ambassador should show their mettle and be strong and stand for those citizens. And yeah, it means taking a risk sometimes, but no, we saw this appointee, and I don't know who appointed him, but I got a strong suspicion I do, just fled the scene and said, sorry guys, I'm out of here, and tail between the legs, abandoned those people back there to a terrible fate. Dave talked about this. Customs officers at airports are going to be armed. Shows how long we got away with things in Canada with them not being armed this long. But part of the problem is gun-toting smugglers and gangland criminals are now present, they say, in the department. And yes, I mean, the guns, that's what we keep getting back to with these registries and the trying to criminalize legal firearm owners. It's not where the guns are coming from. They're being smuggled up. Criminals are bringing those guns up. And no laws targeting duck hunters, firearm collectors, target shooters, trap shooters is going to stop that. It's not going to stop it a bit. And it's gotten to the point, I guess, where so many are coming across that, we're having to have more arms for our customs agents because it gets dangerous. You know, I mean, I imagine a pretty dangerous person to get into conflict with is somebody who's smuggling a firearm. I can think of a keyword that I'd like to have a problem with. Ashley pointing out lithium mining is worse than gas and oil. Yes, you know, that's people forget, you know, that there's this talk. We're going to go electric, go electric, go electric. Going electric comes with a cost. It's not just magical power from the sky, sunshine like that. It doesn't work that way. And these heavy metals, lithium, cobalt, things like that, they are mines in some very environmentally sensitive areas. There's terrible, almost slave labor being used to get it out of there. Don't virtue signal sipping your windmill-powered heated latte and think that you're saving the world by switching to these things. You're just transferring it. And it's often to somewhere worse. But one of the things is the smearing of the oil and gas industry. Think of the idiot Trudeau, what he did, banning tankers on the West Coast. There was some virtue signaling. But something that doesn't help, and this is interesting. So a Department of Transport report talks about we were supposed to have this world-class federal oil tanker safety system, and it lacks clarity and focus. This program, this is just for a system, $395 million. They launched it 9 years ago, and it's just a bunch of paperwork and crap. I think even 9 years ago, the Liberals knew, well, we're just going to, you know, or whoever farther up, just we're going to ban these tankers anyway, so we don't have to worry about having a plan to clean it up if any of them leak. But it makes us look all the more unsafe. I think their solution would be, well, we can't safely, even though it's so rare when those tankers do leak, by the way, but they were going to say, we can't safely do it, so we'll just maintain the bans. You know, it just makes me think of some other things. The ocean's not as sensitive as people like to put it out to be. Like, look all the way back to World War II. I mean, because the way they act as if an oil tanker leaks, the world's going to end. It's going to be, there's no recovering. It's going to be irreversible. We don't want to see one leak. It's terrible. It does make a mess. It'll kill birds. It'll hurt fish. It'll do a lot of damage. Think of World War II, though. How many thousands of ships loaded with bunker oil, crude oil, refined products got sunk? They were sunk daily. Dozens and dozens and dozens of them daily for years. And they surely caused a lot of environmental damage when it happened. Absolutely. But the ocean recovered. It did recover. I mean, we want to mitigate environmental harm. You see, there's this zero harm cultists almost. I mean, it comes to them with the COVID as well. And it comes with the environment. You can't get zero. You just want it as low as possible. Or somebody putting out the BP leak in the Gulf. Yeah, that pumped an incredible amount in, and it did damage. It did damage to the shrimp industries. It was not harmless, not by any means, but it recovered. It does recover. So let's quit pretending that these tankers are some sort of horrific things that could bring the world to an end. They're something we want to safely get across the ocean without leaking. Absolutely. but the hysteria when it comes to them is just beyond the pale, and it just gives more excuses again to these delusional green type advocates and people to try and shut in our industries and stop us from exporting to the world, which ironically leads to them burning more coal, firewood, dung in some of the developing countries, because we can't send them ethically sourced, clean energy sources that we've produced over here, because we get this fear mongering about transporting it even. Speaking of transport, let's see, the Canadian Pacific Railway, which is now on strike. What a mess that is. As if we needed more supply chain issues, as if we needed more farmers having a hard time, because they need it very much for fertilizer, for crops, for seed. You need it, you name it. The agricultural industry is still one of the key areas where the rail is important. And this is not going to help them whatsoever. Let's just hope this thing gets settled as soon as possible. Meanwhile, they are facing, and that's been our top story for a bit now, the Canadian Pacific Railway is facing a lawsuit from 84 of its employees, and they're seeking $1 million each in damages over the country's COVID-19 policies. They were placed on unpaid administrative leave on December 2021, and they're claiming damages for violations of their rights under the Charter. A lot of this is going to go on. I mean, it's not just people pushing back against the government. Some of these, well, CPs I almost call semi-private. They're so regulated and such a monopoly. But either way, they're going to start paying a price for it. I see CNRL has finally gotten rid of all of their, I believe, mandates on that sort of thing. As Nico's shown there, yeah, CP strike is hitting Saskatchewan hard, of course, because Saskatchewan really needs that rail. As people are saying, as Pat pointed out, they need the fertilizer and they need seed and they need a lot of things that are transported, ammonia. And they can't get it. It's going to slow it down. It's going to set it back. And I mean, they've already been dealing with drought and everything else. So 15% of CP's workforce is in Saskatchewan. And this strike is going to hit them very hard. Potash for the, it's a huge product in Saskatchewan where they mine it and export it and send it around. And it's a component for fertilizer as well. Rail, it needs rail. So let's hope that strike gets settled. It's all over the pension plan, I guess. What else have we got coming up here? I got scrolling through. I think we're going to get ready for what's coming up tomorrow. So, yeah, I've been talking with others, by the way. I'm trying to get those other candidates on. I think I might have Leslie Lewis coming pretty soon. And I do want to talk to each and every one of them. As for tomorrow, speaking of energy, though, I'm going to have the president of the Canadian Nuclear Association, John Gorman, on. We're going to talk about, that really gets thrown and forgotten all the time. Nuclear is a power source. Saskatchewan has loads of uranium, and we can very safely produce nuclear energy. And then some of those smaller, what do they call them, modular nuclear power plants, things like that, whether it's the oil sands. I think they're sending one to the Arctic. We've got the energy prices through the roof. All these clowns are always pushing us for windmills and solar panels that don't produce nearly enough power. Nuclear isn't necessarily the most efficient either. But if we're looking at alternatives, we shouldn't be dismissing it. It doesn't emit. It's very safe these days, despite what people like to fearmonger about it all the time. And it's going to be a good talk with him. So John Gorman of the Canadian Nuclear Association and Western Standard columnist Dave Makachuk. And it's funny, he's going to be talking about Arctic sovereignty. As Charest came up on there too, and I didn't expect that, but it's true. I spent some years working up there. And this is where Canada has really dropped the ball on sovereignty. We've really screwed up. I mean, you look at the map of Canada and the amount of space we claim way up north there, and there's a lot of resources in that space, but we can't even get to it. We aren't there. Dew Lion's gone. We don't have bases up there. We don't have citizens up there because it is too horrible and miserable. And for a large part of it, I ranted about this earlier, we can't get to it. When the ice cap is out there, the only thing that'll get around is either heavy-duty icebreakers. We have some degree of that, but not heavy enough, or Arctic subs. We don't have any of those. Meanwhile, China, Russia, the United States are all playing games under our ice with those nuclear subs. If any of them wanted to start taking Arctic resources off us, what the hell could we do about it? And what could our claim be? I mean, if we went to a world court, if I were a judge in some world court and I got these countries all saying, we want this chunk of the Arctic, it's ours, it's ours, it's ours. Say, well, Canada says it's theirs, but there's no roads to it, no people living in it. They don't have any. They haven't developed it. They even shut down their only pipeline that was proposed to go up to Inuvik to deal with it. Well, why have they got a claim on it if they're not even doing anything with it? The Russians could say, well, we're going to develop it. The Americans could say they're going to develop it because they got the means to get there. Even China has better access to the higher reaches of Canada's Arctic than Canada does. That's pretty embarrassing, and it's a problem. It's a big problem. and we better address it. So Dave Makachuk wrote a column on that, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow. So again, for these columns, for the rest, get onto the westernstandardonline.com, guys. Take out a subscription, will you? This is how we can keep doing it. This is how we can stay independent. This is why we do not take government subsidies. We never will. I wouldn't work here if we were taking that. If I wanted the easy route to government subsidized money, I'd be a Canada Post worker and just walk around, deliver flyers, and get a good pension. No, this is much better. And if you use the coupon code TRIGGERED, you'll get $10 off. Great deal for you. And then it's a free trial for 2 weeks. Get in there, take out a membership, get 2 weeks worth beyond the paywall. As Dave showed, we got loads of stories going up every day. Well worth that subscription price, less than a newspaper used to cost you in the past. 95% of the people take the trial, say, yes, I like this. It's great. I'm sticking with it. And they stay on the subscribers. And hey, buy a subscription for a friend. Nag a friend to subscribe. The other reminders, of social media, this is how we can bypass the old media as well. Make sure to like us, all that stuff they put out, like, smash the hit, whatever buttons, all that garbage. It's true, though. If you follow us on Facebook, you follow us on YouTube, you follow us on Rumble, you'll catch the live feeds as they come out. I mean, Melanie was live broadcasting all of that with James last weekend. If you aren't subscribing, you won't see those alerts pop up when it happens. And again, it helps us broaden and spread that word. So by all means, please subscribe if you haven't already and share it with your friends. But okay, I've talked your ears off enough for today. Thank you all for tuning in, and let's keep watching the social media soap opera of the Jesperson Show with, again, that dark comedy sort of way, and see what comes out of all of that. And I will see you all tomorrow morning at 11:30 a.m.